partner in the development of any country. In Kenya, where I'm from, you will see civil society groups providing education in slums and rural areas. They build the capacity of farmers, facilitate access to healthcare facilities. They deal with HIV/AIDS, they deal with humanitarian and hunger and food. But they also play an important role in building an active citizenry that will help the democratic development of the country. This duality, this dual role for CSOs as service providers on the one hand, and as monitors, checks, and advocacy organizations on the other hand, is crucial to the achievement of human rights in the context of rights as indivisible, interrelated, and necessary for the achievement of full human development. The recent events in the Middle East and North Africa emphasize this duality in stark terms. Development as a concept needs to be formulated in holistic terms with due emphases on democratic rights and freedoms to ensure equity and accountability. It is clear that the Arab Spring had roots in both demands for traditional development or growth, as well as for freedom, and the linking up of the two was crucial to drawing out the vast numbers of people that took to the streets to claim their rights. Guaranteed progress towards the realization of economic, social, and cultural rights needs high levels of accountability and transparency, which are underpinned by civil and political freedoms. And I think this country, the fact that we are here in Korea, also exemplifies that, because if we trace the history of Korea, we see that it was impossible to continue doing development and growth without political freedom and rights. And for me, this duality is critical. In my mandate as Special Rapporteur, I look at both economic, social rights on one hand, as well as civil and political rights. The freedom of assembly and association is as important to development as it is important to political rights. And so I find myself in the unique position of working across both areas. Now, the commitment to protecting CSOs has been repeatedly broken by governments across the world. In addition to the traditional ways of restricting civil society activities, such as intimidation, arbitrary arrests, there has now been a wide proliferation of legal and policy restrictions on civil society groups to prevent them from participating in activities related to the disbursement, utilization, and monitoring of aid. And one of the things that we find is that where you have vast corruption, where you have the development agenda of a country often going downhill, you'll always find that political freedoms are also restricted. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important for us to work to see those two things hand in hand. Democratic institutions and the existence of the freedoms of expression, association, and assembly are vital to holistic and meaningful development, as they alone can ensure proper correlation of developmental statistics, equitable focus on the vulnerable and marginalized, and optimum utilization of development funds. Over the last few years, the task team on CSO development effectiveness and enabling environment, which is co-chaired by Sweden, Mali, and the Canadian Council of International Cooperation, has developed a very important document with key messages to the fourth high-level forum. I would like to draw your attention to what the task team is calling for in terms of provide, promote, and monitor an enabling environment for CSOs that maximizes their contribution to development. Specifically, this is calling on states to commit and promote an enabling environment for CSOs as independent development actors, both in law and practice, at minimum in keeping with existing commitments in international and regional instruments that guarantee fundamental human rights. That I've been hearing the discussions this morning, and I know there's a bit of issues around that, but I think the fact that these fundamental rights are already agreed upon by states should make it easier for us to incorporate them as fully as we can. These rights are the freedom of association, the freedom of expression, the right to operate free from unwarranted state interference, the right to communicate and cooperate, the right to seek and secure funding, and the state's duty to protect civil society's space. Let's emphasize that. I think it's very important, because whatever we do, nothing we do can be important if we don't have that space. An enabling environment for civil society can be created through enhancing a dialogue between civil society and government. This high-level forum provides an opportunity for such a dialogue, and I urge us all to use this as effectively as possible. For the alternatives are often messier, harder, and very costly, as the Arab Spring again teaches us. So where we cannot talk between ourselves and governments, then we have to find other ways to talk. And we heard from Tony today very clearly saying that if he can't get his way, he expects you all out there making as much noise as possible. And I wish you luck when you do that. I think the Korean police will not beat you up as other police do. So you're more than welcome to do that. I think you'll be safe in Korea. This is not other countries where I've been to, where you have to think twice before you go out there. But the enabling environment can also be created through a participatory process of drafting laws governing or regulating the civil society sector. But beneficiaries of the law must be key to the drafting process, or it will only serve to cause conflicts and worse, limit the benefits to the ordinary citizens it is meant to serve. And I want to emphasize this, governments need to ensure the protection of several main international principles: freedom of assembly, freedom of association, freedom of expression, the rights of civil society groups to seek and secure funding, and the state's duty to protect these freedoms and rights. Now, as we're doing that, we also need to recognize that there are duties that we, the civil society world, need to incorporate in our work and in our advocacy. And just as we call on governments to be more transparent and to use a rights-based approach to development and assistance, we as CSOs must do the same. In all the work we do for the poor and ordinary people, we must and should be led by human rights principles from the beginning to the end. And all the rights-based approaches principles, I think, are critical in this. And one of the most important ones, of course, is transparency and inclusiveness. That means we have to be transparent in our work and in our finances. That means we need to be inclusive, mindful of the needs of the weak and marginalized, and emphasize diversity in our staffing, our locations, and beneficiaries. And we must be accountable not just to the donors who give us money, but more so to the people we work with and for. But let me also state that this call for transparency and accountability must not be made into an excuse by governments to attack and restrict civil society organizations. I think it's important that better off if civil society organizations can do their own regulation and come up with their processes that on themselves that regulate this rather than going to the state. I think every time the state gets involved in this kind of work, just like the media, it ends up restricting rather than helping. But all this means that we as NGOs and civil society must be creative and flexible in what we do, knowing that what worked 10 years ago may not work as well today. The tactics and strategies we used even 5 years ago may now be relevant with changing dynamics. And for this we need to be as organic as possible, listening to those we work with and letting them set some of the agendas for us, in much the same way as we're asking governments to let us set the agenda for them. And I want to send a similar message to donors. Since 2005, donors, while generally increasing the levels of aid, and we must salute them, and those who have done that, we must salute those who have done that, have seemed to prefer to fund governments and international governmental bodies such as UNDP at the expense of NGOs. This, in my mind, should not be an either-or question. Donors need to fund both governments but also CSOs. But clearly, they also need to be more strategic and flexible when they engage with CSOs, and in a way that promotes the work of the CSO and their role as development partners in their own right, without making it much more difficult, more time-consuming, and bureaucratic for the CSOs to access funding. And this is especially true in poor countries. And again, especially true in poor countries and fragile countries where governance is iffy and on pro-democracy work. And in these countries, changing circumstances, often in a negative way, mean that CSO priorities change quickly. And they change very quickly, making it hard for CSOs to respond. I remember in Kenya in 2007, 2008, when the country almost descended into civil war. There were very few donors able and willing to reallocate their funds quickly to civil society organizations to respond to the issues that were going on the front line. And I must say that had those ones not done so, had those ones who were able to be flexible, had they not been able to do so, I think Kenya would have probably broken out into a civil war. So I hope that this high-level forum, I hope that starts in 3 days, will consider these key messages developed by the task team through consultation with various stakeholders over the last few years. And let me state finally, as I begin to close, so you can go for lunch, that in my role as the UN Special Rapporteur, I see myself as your tool to enhance your work, to support your demands for increased space, and generally monitor what states and non-state actors are doing with respect to the freedoms of assembly and of association. So please use me, please harass me, please inundate me with your complaints, issues and input, and they're all very welcome. I'll make the team that works with me in Geneva work even harder. And in this respect, my office in Geneva should